Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of A Handful of Hope. I am so happy and grateful to have Robert Grigore with us here today, who is a world-class mental health expert and a registered clinical counselor, certified EMDR therapist, and approved EMDR consultant, published EMDR author, and the owner and CEO of Grigore Counselling. Robert has dedicated his practice to helping leaders and professionals in business, entertainment, and athletics, as well as their families, to eliminate their deepest pain, worst fears, and repair the foundations of their most cherished relationships, all while offering what money cannot buy: time. Robert offers his selected clients the shortcut to the top of the mountain of self-actualization because he believes that is there where our true journey begins. Robert, welcome, and thank you so very much for being here.
Jesse, thank you so much for having me here, and to all of your listeners to have me in your ears. It's a real pleasure.
Dude, we had such an incredible conversation beforehand, and I'm so excited to continue it. And I have to dive in with self-actualization. I think that is a fascinating thing to give as an offering. And I'm wondering, when I hear self-actualization, that to me seems like that's the ultimate hot fudge sundae kind of, right? But when people come to you and they're seeking out your services, are they coming because they're actually looking for self-actualization? Are they actually looking for the hot fudge sundae? Are they looking for it, but they don't necessarily have the language to articulate what it is they're looking for?
That's a great question. And usually what happens is people come to me because they're in pain right now, and they want that pain gone immediately. It's like, I use the analogy, if you have a knife in your leg, you can't think about what you're going to do on Saturday. You got to get the knife out of your leg. So that's the first thing that people usually come to me for is, I have this anxiety, I have this problem with my relationship. And in the process of connecting with them initially, I find out that really that's just the first part of the puzzle that they need fixed. What they're really looking for is some much bigger experience in life. And this is where I think that we all need to really go, is to work towards this self-actualization. And at that point, then, life really opens up in some magical ways. And I think that that's really where we need to begin, and where our life has its most meaning is at that moment there.
Do you find, Robert, you and I share a few different, I think some of the different kind of clientele I've worked with, quite a few people in entertainment and athletics and in business. And I've also found, and I'm curious if you have too, what's absolutely fascinating is the people who come in who seem to be at the proverbial top of the mountains that we're taught to essentially value and strive for in our society. And also the mountains that then, therefore, because there's such a select percentage to actually get to that top of the mountain, we are the mountains that are some of the greatest sources of stress, anxiety, depression, whatnot. Do you find that the folks who are at that top of that mountain, when they come in, are they struggling with the same stuff that everyone else is? I find it absolutely fascinating sometimes, for me at least, when I see people on those mountaintops and they're saying almost the same thing that somebody else is, who thinks that everything will be so much better when they get on the mountain that person is on, that they're struggling from.
You hit it right on the head, Jesse. When it all comes down to it, you strip away the fame, you strip away the reputation, you strip away, the success, quote unquote, and what you get is a human being. And that human being has human experiences, and human beings have stress, anxiety, depression, and it sounds the same. It might have a little, maybe different flavor to it, right? It might be bigger in some areas, maybe it's culminated into some bigger experience, but when it comes right down to it, it is the same fundamentals. Humanness.
Robert, gosh, I'm forming this question as I ask it to you. What do you find is the most, actually, I don't like that. Do you find that there is innate qualities of humanness that that both that one divide us and one unite us. And I'm curious because I feel like in the time that you and I are talking right now, the time recording is July 14th, 2020. And you and I were just talking beforehand how you're in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm in Santa Barbara, Southern California. Both of our respected areas are going back into a lockdown, quarantine, shelter in place type thing because of COVID. There is a lot of talk and there's a lot of division on what's going on with COVID. And also in the US, we have these talks going on about race relations and whatnot. And so there's this constant, I feel like, juxtaposition of united and divided, united and divided. You know, you wear a mask or you don't. And the reasons why you should seem to have less to do with health and more to do with, are you with us or against us? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just really curious, like, you know, in talking about the humanness and the human animal, what are some common things that you find are the common threads that unite us in our humanness, but also then divide us in our humanness?
I love that. What a deep, deep, deep philosophical question. And for those of you listening, I'm sure you know Jesse's got a lot of those deep questions. This, for me, answering this question, it comes down to something very simple for me. What divides us as human beings is fear, and what unites us as human beings is love.
Hmm.
Every decision that we make in life can be divided into those two categories. Are you afraid? Are you making a decision out of fear, or are you making it out of love? And when we open up, you know, these large, very important discussions around, you know, what's happening in the world in terms of race and COVID-19, and you think about all the amount of fear that's now created, and what I tend to think is actually was there all along. These are just the precipitating factors that are triggering the release of this more national fear that the, you know, people in North America and the world really have been, you know, fostering in their unconscious for so long, and now it's becoming apparent on a global scale. This is what humanity is suffering with right now. This is the greater fear.
Hmm.
And the way that we move through all of that is through love. Can you love that person who is wearing the mask? And can you love that person who's not wearing the mask? It's very challenging for some people to do that.
Why is it, Robert? Why is it so challenging for us to love when it's the thing that we all desire? It's the thing that we know, I think, in our most vulnerable and honest moments is the source of greatest pleasure, but also for those of us who have been hurt, the greatest pain.
Mhm.
And we also, I think if we look really honestly with the person we see in the mirror, we acknowledge that it's the thing that we all want so much. So why is it so hard for us to give that which we desire?
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. And you know, the depths of this question go very, 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 very deep. In my opinion, we're talking about what has kept human beings alive through our entire species. We are programmed to bond with our caregivers, right? So this is how important relationships are, right? We are, when we're very little, I have a 13-month-old son at home. So I can tell you when he was first born, you know, if we didn't care for his every need, he would certainly have died. And we've, from, you know, way back when we were, you know, cave people, and we were running around with spears, and, you know, we had to be afraid of everything that wasn't within our group. We didn't have sharp teeth. We don't have claws. We can't run very fast. We survived by forming tribe, by forming relationships, attaching to our tribe. And even, you know, opposing tribes, you know, there it was, I'm sure, all different sorts of battles, and, you know, certain parts, species of human were killed off, etc. So we evolved by noticing the distinctions between, one tribe versus another. This is a safe animal, that's a bad animal, a dangerous animal. This is a safe berry, a dangerous berry. Division was inherent in our subconscious. We had to know the difference between something safe and something dangerous. So I think that this goes right down to the very core of our evolution as a species. Now, we've come to the point in our development where we have the chance as a species to go above that. This is the choice point where we now are faced with the ability. I mean, you and I are connecting right now over Zoom. We can talk to a stranger on the other side of the planet and instantly, and we can develop a relationship with that person instantly. We have the opportunity to now learn how to cultivate love individually and globally. And that is why we're here. In my opinion, we're not here to go and make $1 million and then die and then give that to our kids. That's, excellent on one hand, of course, but we are really here, in my opinion, to first eliminate all the issues that all of the sources of fear in our lives, in our unconscious. We have to get rid of that. And then we're able to then love those around us. And our greater mission opens up, which is to unite the planet, to increase human consciousness, and, really see where we can go as a species. And ultimately, we're talking about elevating our spiritual consciousness.
I love that distinction, the great opportunity we all have right now to love. Robert, let me ask you this. Do you believe that I've often wrestled with this. Like I have this belief, and that I really believe that if we're going to love another fully, we must first love ourselves completely. But I also believe, like, the juxtaposition with that is I also believe that it's possible for us to love of others even if we may not fully love self. And I think, but there's something innately about that first part that feels so true. And I don't know if that wrestles into, it's elevating that relationship dynamic from I'll love you in a you scratch my back, I scratch yours, which I think a lot of us exist in that plane, right, of relationships. It's very much a commodity exchange. We'll use romanticized terms like unconditional love, when reality is that the love agreement is fully on condition. I will love you as long as you do X, Y, and Z, which I usually won't articulate to you, right? It's going to all be assumed. And then when you do it, how dare you not mind reading me? And so on. And so maybe that piece is really, it's about that evolution of consciousness, in the sense of we're evolving from almost a commoditized exchange of love. You do this, I'll do that, to I'm just going to love because loving feels right. It feels good. It feels like that's my essence.
I love that.
So I guess, there's a question in there that I completely forgot to ask. And the question is then, do you feel that the path to loving more, to embracing that opportunity to love, to elevate collective consciousness, does it start with self? Is it a focus on others first? In your opinion, like, if somebody could come away with this and they're listening to this and they're feeling it and there's an innate draw to it, and if we were to give them an actionable, but how can you take this concept of love and go out into the world and start doing this? Is it a demonstration of love or an act of love that is focused externally, or is it one that's focused, do we go inward first?
I think that the way I'll answer that is it's both. I think that when I'm talking about unconditional love, I'm talking about loving something more than you, right? When I look at my child, and for most parents that are listening, I would make the assumption that most people would die for their children. And so that's loving a person, a cause, a mission that's more important than your particular life 7 days a week.
Hmm.
So I think it can go both ways. In going from the global first, for a lot of people that perhaps don't necessarily have a lot of their ducks in a row in terms of their own personal development, I think that the what I call agape love, right, which is the unconditional love that in Greek mythology talked about a lot. But this is loving that bigger thing, what's pulling, what the world needs more. And I think this could be broken down in terms of global climate change and these major issues. We have racism as a major issue that we're still dealing with. I can't believe that we're still dealing with that, to be very honest with you. But you could find a purpose, and you can find that sense of unconditional love from devoting oneself to these greater missions. And I think that you can also, develop this unconditional love by doing what I touched on a little bit before, but first eliminating all of these negative beliefs, all of the internal fears that you've gathered as a person from your early childhood and from the legacy that your parents left and their parents and their parents and so on and so forth. Negative beliefs, challenging perspectives, cultural traditions, all these things are passed down from generation to generation. And it's the individual's job to put a stop to the negative, take what's positive out of those relationships, and cultivate love themselves. So when there's nothing left to fear, love becomes the default. So it can go from both ways. And I think that if you start on one end, you have to do the other end as well. So you don't get, you can't bypass it and just jump into, serving the planet if you don't do any of your work. But it's certainly, you can start anywhere.
I want to dig on that when there's nothing left to fear. I'm with you. I love that. And I wonder, how do we get there? If we, there's so many definitions of fear. So let's just play with false events appearing real. How do we ever get past nothing to be fear when most of our fears are imagined futures that are literally the 1 in a million worst case scenarios, right? And the human brain, the human animal, is such a creative source of fear hallucination, in the sense of, and I feel like now especially we have so many sources that are vying for creative input on us. It's a nice way of saying influence. And most news headlines are fear. You go on social media, a lot of fear. And most of our movies, there's these different fears that could be articulated, almost archetypes of fears, right? And so we can assimilate all this, and unconsciously we're making these presumptions about worst case possible scenarios and future. So I love that once we get past fear, love is the default. But how do we get past fear when we're dealing with, how do we get past fear in the present when we're dealing with imagined futures?
Yeah, this is such a, I think we could probably talk about this for hours, because this is such a deep question. And how I envision fear is that fear is really a human experience. And when you talk to most spiritual leaders in the world, you'll hear this pretty frequently. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And there's, the part of the brain and the human part of us that's an animal, we are, of course, naturally concerned about the ultimate fear, which is our own death. And when we come from the perspective that, in fact, our body is just this human, experience, but there's something greater that I am, the part of you that's aware of you thinking, that is aware of you having a body, having all this awareness. where does that go? It has to go somewhere. So that's, from my perspective, is that when we think about our life as only this tiny fraction of your soul's journey, the events that occur in life aren't as distressing. There's, of course, going to be stressors, but death isn't the scariest thing that can happen. I actually tend to work with my clients. One of the first targets that we eliminate in the EMDR world, we call events targets. We work on the fear of death. And so I eliminate a person's worst fears so that they're no longer, what grips, what drives that person's vehicle in their life. I'm opening that person up to their full ability to love. So I think death is one of the major things that we have to eliminate. We need to come to a place where we're no longer afraid of death. It doesn't mean you're going to become suicidal or something. This means that you're simply, going to unlock your potential for greatness.
I'm hearing you that when we get past that fear of death, it's almost as if that's where we really can start to live to our highest potential.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
That's certainly something, that I know that you're intimately familiar with. I watched your amazing TED Talk, and you talk about grief, and you talking about what comes up when you really value the time that you have, right? And this is one of the things that I value the most as well, is time. We don't know when that time is going to come up, when the big man upstairs or our spirit's going to call us home, or however you want to put that. We don't know when that is. So, we need to, it's a strange, place to be, where you're living every single moment, not because you're afraid of death, but because you know what you're here for.
Yeah, when you live every single moment, not because you're afraid of death, but because you know why you're here. That knowing thing, I feel like, so is the knowing, is it an illusion? Because I'll hear people say, I wish I knew why I was here. But I also hear them say that, and I feel like deep down they may know why they're here. Mm-hmm. They just don't have the language, or they may not quite have the courage or the skill set to confront that fear piece that keeps them from going to that deeper level of really embracing that knowing.
Exactly. And so, if we take this back around to one of your earlier questions, if you don't mind me doing so, and when I have these celebrity clients that come to see me and are expressing very human problems, just like everybody else, it comes down to, the why. What's the real deep why for their existence? And oftentimes that's the thing that people are struggling with. So you've amassed, let's say, $100 million. Who cares? Why? What are you doing with that? I mean, money is great. I understand the pain of it. I've almost been bankrupt and homeless myself. I understand the fear of not having money. And I also understand the vehicle that money can provide. It's a pathway to opening up opportunities. So why? What is the purpose of your existence? It's not to get a second Grammy Award. It's a great accolade. Enjoy it, love it. You deserve it. But now that you've reached this status, this influential status, now your voice is a leader amongst all who listen to you. And that's why I devote my practice to helping leaders, because these are the people that people listen to and follow. That leader, I really need them to have their shit sorted out. Sorry for swearing on here, but to have everything. I want them to self-actualize so that now they can bring other people to that level. Once we get to the point of acknowledging our purpose here, acknowledging our abilities to help this planet, our soul's journey, our soul's job is to help elevate other people.
Hmm. What would you say, Robert, to that person who I feel like with all the uncertainty during this very unique time in human history, people are questioning and asking a lot of questions in themselves, but tragically, some of them are making some very harmful statements to themselves too. And they're also making some really great statements to themselves too. I don't want to disclude that. The person who's listening to this and they are hearing that and they are saying, gosh, I want to help people, but what do I have to offer? And they're comparing that to the I'll give an example. So I don't know if the news traveled up to Vancouver, but there was a TV show called Glee. I think was the name of the TV show. And there was an actress from that show who just, I think, drowned in a lake that's not very far from where I live. And I saw a thing on Twitter where one of her friends had sent a message to the sheriff's department that was in charge in the operation of trying to recover, and they had the divers and all those people in there, and saying, like, because she's sitting in that place of her friend's missing, it's multiple days, she's wanting to do something, she's in that helpless place feeling like she can't help, so she's wanting to go on foot and operate, go on foot, look, get some friends together, do that. And they're saying, making a general statement, anybody who wants to help, please don't, we don't want to have to rescue you. We have equipment, we have training for it. Absolutely right. So we can get that logically. I've been in that spot where she was, not knowing about a loved one, wanting to go find them. But I've also, in a smaller scale, and I think this is where many of us have been, we've been in that space where we see heartbreak, hurt, pain happening outside, whether it's someone we know or we don't know. And we so desperately want to help, but we don't know how, because we don't know how compared to this other person. I would give $25 to this charity, but what's the point? Because so-and-so is giving $25,000. I would go walk on foot and look for my friend, but what's the point? Because I'm not trained and skilled to do these types of things. So I'm wondering, like, if we could address those people specifically right now who, because I love that, like, the soul's journey is helping of others. And they're in that comparison space of, I want to help, but how do we get them out of that comparison space? Or maybe it's a sense of feeling like they want to help, but they don't know how, or they can't, and get them into a embracing, actionable space of, hey, your $25 makes all the difference in the world. Your phone call could be the greatest thing ever. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So just on the one aspect of this is the smallest gesture can be life-saving. Like, think about somebody who's walking down the street and maybe they're suicidal and they're thinking that they're going to jump off a bridge or something like that. And by simply acknowledging that person, giving them a smile, looking at them in the eyes, maybe they now feel that they are here, and then they aren't invisible anymore, that they are validated at least on their human level. And then that person may then make a different choice and continue to live their life. A smile can save a life. So when I hear people talk about comparisons, this is always that imposter syndrome kind of thing, right? I'm not good enough. And if you're comparing yourself on a particular let's say a monetary value, my $25 versus a $25,000 investment, yeah, your human, your logical capability is going to say, well, my $25 isn't the same as the 25,000. Get it. From a logical perspective, sure. But that might not be the particular thing you're supposed to do, right? It might be useful, right? Like, just like you said, maybe they need another $25 and then they reach their goal, and then, right, now they can go and feed a family or something. But this concern for comparing oneself to somebody else, this is again, very human, natural thing that we do, right? I think back to, when we were in tribes and, we were comparing ourselves to, the next suitable mate, for example. This is just bred into us. But try never to compare yourself with somebody else. It doesn't do any good. Who you should compare yourself to is simply you from yesterday, and then you from 2 days ago, and then you from last week, and then you from a month ago. This is the only comparison that does any value in the world. Now, when somebody thinks my $25 isn't enough, or what can I do? I think that the deeper why really comes from your early life experiences. They're going to show you what it is that you want to change about this world. There's a lot of pain and suffering and trauma that everybody has experienced to some degree. I personally believe that nobody escapes childhood unscathed. Everybody has something. And those early experiences really can propel you into what it is that you're supposed to do. But first, you have to clear away all the pain. You got to clear away all the cobwebs. You got to clear away all the stuff that's not yours. And then it's going to become clear for you.
Robert, we're running close on time. Before I ask my question, where can people find you online?
GrigoreCounselling.com. That's my website, spelled with 2 L's because I'm up in Canada. I have to point that out. I do own the domain for the other one as well, though, with 1 L. Side note. I'm also on Instagram, Grigore Counselling. I'm on Twitter, @InfoGrigore, and Facebook, Grigore Counselling as well. So all those ways you can reach me and start the conversation that way.
Robert, this has been absolutely such a fascinating conversation, and I feel like I've barely begun to even scratch the tip of the iceberg with you. And selfishly, I would love to continue going, but as I told you before, this is where I wrestle with that, being respectful of your time and the time of the listeners. I'll end with this. I'm curious for you, when you end your day and your head hits the pillow and you're closing your eyes, what do you define for yourself as a well-lived day?
Great questions, Jesse. Great questions. I think I need to feel, number one, I'm a feeler. So I need to feel satisfied. I need to feel like, okay, I did everything that I felt like I needed to do in the day. And this doesn't mean I'm doing 30 things. It could be one single thing or 2 single things that I'm doing in the day. But I need to feel satisfied and that I am moving in the direction of my greater purpose. If I feel in alignment with that, then I can rest more peacefully.
I love that, man. Everyone, my goodness, are you going to want to rewatch and re-listen? This is going to be one of those ones that I think we all need to rewatch and re-listen 4 or 5 times to really be able to go to the depth of some of the things that Robert shared today. I love that he gave the origin of emotion and that there's 2. There's fear and love, and then we have derivatives from them. The idea that if we were to eliminate all fear, then all there would be was the default to love. God, what a beautiful concept that is. And what an incredible world that would be in. And it's funny, we can have the conversation about the piece of fear, but then deep down, most of us know that if we were to do our own work and address some of our own fears, we know there's much more of a capacity to love. Speaking of capacity to love, I love he posed the juxtaposition of wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. How do you love the one that's doing what you aren't doing? And wouldn't that be an incredible invitation to extend to yourself as you leave here today, is to ask of yourself, how do I love the person who's not doing what I'm doing? How do I just begin to love the person who believes maybe what I don't believe, or at least they subscribe to different information that I do? How do I learn to love and respect the person who doesn't have the same life experiences, who doesn't have the luxury of the same journey and learnings that you have? That doesn't make either one of you right or wrong. What it does mean is it means both of you as human beings have these incredible opportunities in front to ask yourself the question, how can I learn to love more? Looking at the idea of the evolution of relationships, right? There's that evolution of relationships and really considering how do we evolve to that bigger soulful piece of what is our sole purpose in all this, to be of service, to help one another. So as you ask yourself that question and you solve the easy one, right? How do I love the other one? Where no small feat there, then maybe perhaps you can upgrade it to how am I going to help? As Robert was saying, that looking at the $25 to $25,000, it occurred to me that when we measure against who we were the day before versus others, if yesterday we would have been able to only give $24 and today we're able to give 25, in terms of a percentage jump, that's a significantly greater jump, I would argue, than the person who yesterday was able to give 24,000 is able to give 25. If we're looking at things in that way, and you are your ultimate measuring stick. You really, really are in your capacity to help, your capacity to give, your capacity to love, and lastly, but your capacity to truly live, allowing yourself to set yourself free from the fear to live as fully as possible. Robert, man, this has been absolutely incredible. What a blessing you have been. And I so appreciate you willing to go and guide us on this journey. This was an incredible journey through love and fear. And I thank you for leading us through it.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show with you, Jesse, and to connect with your listeners. And I also want to encourage the listeners to rewind to that summary that you just eloquently, put out there. It was beautiful. And there's some other fantastic episodes on your podcast that I would encourage listeners to listen to, as well as talking a lot about relationships and meaning out of redefining wealth. So episode 65 I wrote down here with Seth Streeter and Charles Bird. Episode 76, check those out, they're fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Robert, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you
We
so
will
much.
see you next time, everybody, on another edition of A Handful of Hope. Bye-bye.